Welcome to the Superconscious Success Podcast, where Jen and her Superconscious Success family co-hosts bring you valuable content each and every week on topics relating to manifestation, spirituality, and most of all, using your superconscious to manifest success in all areas of your life. Now on to today's episode.
Hey there, Superconscious Success fam. Welcome back to another episode where we are going to be talking to an incredible, beautiful human being today who I am so blessed to have on this show. Now, her name is Martha Clarke, and she's an astrologer, an astrocartographer, and writer. And through her knowledge of the planets, she helps people find the best place in the world to live in order to bring out their most creative side and to express themselves fully. Let's face it, that's what we all want. So I am intensely interested in astrology. And with the planets going through retrogrades and conjunctions at the moment, I just know that you are going to find this podcast absolutely enlightening. So hi, Martha. How are you today?
Hi, Jen. Lovely to talk to you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, lovely to talk to you too. We've had a couple of chats before, and such a beautiful human being. I'm so blessed to have you on this show. And before we get started into astrology and all the craziness happening at the moment, as we've just spoken about, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you come into astrology, and kind of what's your backstory?
Thank you very much. I get asked that all the time. I've always loved astrology, even from when I was 12 years old. And when I worked in tourism in my 20s, I just happened to notice that half the people I worked with were always Geminis. I have no idea why. And then it turns out that the travel industry suits the Gemini energy very well. And then fast forward about 30 years, and I had an astrology reading during my divorce, and it made sense of my life in a way nothing else did. And then fast forward another few years when I moved to Italy to develop photography, and that didn't work very well. And then I had started studying astrology, and one of my business coaches said, well, why don't you start doing some free astrology readings and see if you can convert them and see how you get on? And that's what I did. And I became an astrologer overnight while I was still studying. And to me, astrology makes sense of the world in a way nothing else does. It gives you a really, really deep understanding of who you really are, what you came into this world to learn and experience to give to the world. It's like your astrology chart is like your astrological blueprint for what your soul came here in this lifetime to learn and experience. It's like your astrological birth cert.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when we talk about astrology, we're talking about the horoscopes, we're talking about the planets, we're talking about all of it combined. So I listen to my horoscopes every day. I just absolutely love it. I'm delving really deeply into my own astrology charts and that sort of thing. So I'm really excited because this year I think is going to be a massive year. I think there's a lot going on. At the moment, we've got two planets that are going direct into Capricorn around the same time. We're going to go into that shortly. But before we get started, because something crazy is happening at the moment, and thank goodness it's about to end shortly, but we are stuck in Mercury Retrograde at the moment. And we have talked about this previously, about what can happen during this time, but can you explain what Mercury Retrograde is and why things go a little bit crazy at this time?
Yeah, it's actually a very misunderstood astrological phenomenon. And one of the reasons why Mercury retrograde has become so much more talked about is simply because we have so much more technology in our lives. You know, Mercury goes retrograde 3 times a year. This year, it's actually going retrograde 4 times. And it's a period of 3 weeks. Now we have a pre-shadow and a post-shadow phase, 3 weeks building up to Mercury retrograde and 3 weeks coming out of Mercury retrograde, which in some ways are almost equally important. And as I said, it's important to remember it does seem to be affecting people more in the last 5 or 8 years as we have more technology in our lives, because Mercury symbolizes travel, technology, and communication. Now, the important thing to remember is the re part of it. It's a time of reflecting, rewinding, going back to maybe unfinished communication, going back to maybe diaries or essays or letters that you meant to finish off and you haven't. So it's very much a time, it's kind of like Mercury was the only god who lived between the spirit world and the earthly world and the underworld. All the other planets were either, spiritual gods, or like Pluto was the god of the underworld, for example. Neptune is the god of the sea. But Mercury was the only god that was allowed to travel between the three worlds. So Mercury is, I'm very biased about Mercury because half my chart is ruled by Mercury. I could write 10 books on Mercury retrograde at this stage. And as somebody who has a lot of Mercury in their natal chart, I have noticed it does affect me more. And I think it's simply the amount of Mercury I have in my chart that makes me more affected. But if you think about it, like 5 or 8 years ago, we didn't have WhatsApp. We had Facebook Messenger. We weren't using it as much. We didn't have Zoom. We only had Skype. Now we have 4 or 5 different platforms. One person uses Zoom, somebody else uses Skype, somebody else uses MSN, somebody else uses Microsoft. 7 years ago, it was Skype or nothing. So it stands to reason. It's like if you have 6 cars, you have 6 times more likely of something happening to one of the 6 cars than if you only have 1 car. That's kind of the simple way to explain why Mercury retrograde has become such a big deal. And I don't agree with the things, where people say don't sign contracts or don't move or don't travel. I mean, if you were to do that 3 times a year for 9 weeks of the year, sure, nobody go anywhere or do anything. But it is very much a time, I regard it as a time where Mercury just takes a break from being the busy person communicating everywhere. So it's a time to reflect, reboot, go back for walks in nature, meet friends for in-person cups of coffee. And that's something we couldn't do for that. Well, certainly in Ireland, it's something we haven't been able to do for the last 2 years. But I would encourage people to detach from technology as much as they can during that time. Or else, if you are using technology, to allow extra time, as we discovered, both of us had similar experiences yesterday and today. Or the other thing I always suggest to people is always give the other person the benefit of the doubt. If you sent an email and they haven't replied, it happened to me once in Cape Cod. I had sent somebody an email and she never replied. And I bumped into her in a cafe 6 weeks later and she went, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought I replied. I drafted the email and I never pressed the send button." So always give the other person the benefit of the doubt. That's the biggest piece of advice I can give anybody during Mercury retrograde.
Absolutely. And this
you.
Yeah, well, this is what I was saying to you before. Like, I've had interviews and just before our interviews, people's computers crashed, so of course they're a bit delayed, and she was so apologetic, and I said, look, it's okay, don't worry, we're in Mercury retrograde right now, and I allow for this sort of stuff to happen. It does not stress me out, and the same with myself. I'm very lenient on myself with it. If my microphone does decide to chop in and out today, which can happen because it's being a real pain this morning, just remember I'm in Mercury retrograde and it's deciding to play tricks on me. So I'll do the best I can. So we've got Mercury retrograde. We're in that. When does Mercury retrograde finish before we head into the post shadow?
Yeah, Mercury retrograde ends next Thursday, the 3rd of February, and then goes into the post-shadow phase for roughly another 3 weeks. And the post-shadow phase then ends on Wednesday, the 23rd of February.
Okay,
but,
so is there...
The full-blown retrograde period is the most important one of the
because the postgrade is not as intense, obviously, as when we're in the, but it's kind of like a way for us to start to move out of that phase. And so then we've also got Venus retrograde. So when can you go a bit into that, because Venus is a beautiful planet, and as we were talking before, I absolutely love Venus retrogrades in terms of relationships, in terms of love, in terms of friendships. It can play a really positive part in your life. So can you go into Venus retrograde for us?
Yeah, I absolutely love Venus retrograde because people don't realize that, the outer planets spend between 40 to 60% of the time in retrograde in any given year. So in any given year, we'll have either, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of them even retrograde. Venus only goes retrograde every 18 months because, of course, we don't have the sun or the moon going retrograde. So Venus goes retrograde every 18 months. And I have to say, it's a beautiful time. It's one of my favorite astrological timelines. So Venus is going direct now on the 29th of January. And everybody thinks Venus is just all about love and seduction, but Venus is also your value system, and it's your finances, and it's your sense of justice, and it's your sense of fairness. So it's very much about what you love and who you love and what you value, and how you reevaluate what you value and who you love. And what's fascinating is what we've been seeing happening, in Ireland, for example, there's quite a lot of court cases being taken against various government departments. That's people standing up for what they value. I mean, that's huge. What we've seen literally as of 2 days ago, the Canadian truck drivers are driving across Canada. They're about to arrive in Ottawa tomorrow or the next day, and they're not budging from the front of the Canadian government buildings. And American truck drivers are crossing the border to join them. And then this morning I read that Australian truck drivers are going, hey lads, we're down under, we're doing the same. That's the embodiment of Venus retrograde, standing up for, for what you believe in and what you value. Now that's heightened by the fact that we also have Mercury conjunct Pluto at the moment, from the 21st of January until the 18th of February. But the other thing about Venus retrograde, it is very often a time when people you love come back into your life. Or if it's not people you love, it could be maybe a book you haven't read for a long time, or you come across the album of one of your favorite singers when you were in your 20s or when you were a teenager. So it's a very deeply, beautifully reflective time, where I do encourage people to sit down and just rewrite about what they revalue. And we're all coming out of 2 years of the most horrendous lockdowns, and there's never been a better time to say, well, after what we've all been through in the last 2 years, like, what do I now really value? I thought it was my job and my big salary, but maybe it's freedom. I thought it was my house, but maybe it's my friends. I thought it was my husband, but maybe it's I want to write a book.
And I think and I think that this is a really good time to be able to rewrite your story, because as you said, we've been for 2 years. I've been very blessed in Perth. I haven't had too many issues so far, but I think during the Venus retrograde it's a great time to rewrite that story that you made, that how you want your life to be, how you reflect on where you've been, and then rewrite it based on what your life, like you said, what do you value now? What do you see the world as being? So I think it's a really beautiful time. Now Venus goes direct, you said, on the 29th. So we're almost there. What can we expect to see? Yeah, what can we expect to see once it goes direct? Like, what can we expect to change?
For example, I'll certainly be keeping a very close eye on what's happening in Canada, because it was only yesterday that I saw, that American truck drivers are crossing the border to join the Canadians. Like, that's unheard of. Or even the idea of Canadians protesting against anything. It's not part of their culture. It just isn't.
No.
So what we are going to see is, like, we probably will start seeing a loosening of restrictions, worldwide. I mean, I know in theory they've started loosening restrictions in Europe. The big spiel is that, you can travel more freely as long as you're vaccinated. And then when you read the small print, you can still travel more freely even if you're not. They're not advertising it, but if you read the small print, it's there. So I think we can see, quite a big loosening up of restrictions worldwide. I mean, Britain got rid of the vaccine pass last week, and then Ireland followed suit 3 days later. That's how fast it happened. And it happened while Venus was retrograde. It's almost like, things started opening up while Venus was retrograde, so that when Venus goes direct, we're ready to go, because, it's kind of going to be like going back into the world after having been in the cave for 2 years. It really is. You know, people in Europe, for example, may not have been affected as people in countries like Ireland where the weather is worse. You know, if you were under lockdown in Italy, you could still go for walks under the sun, for example, or have a coffee in an outdoor cafe and the sun was shining. So again, it's going back to people are reevaluating, and the little things have now become the big things. Having coffee with a friend is now a big thing. We haven't been able to do it for 2 years.
And that's the thing, and I think
yesterday we were there for 3 hours.
And that's the thing. I think that we've really started to be able to get in touch with what's really important, because, you know, going through all of this, and I believe that everything happens for a purpose. I believe that, you know, our source and our souls, and we all have a reason behind all of this. And I think people are starting to realize, and they're starting to reevaluate their values because of that fact. It's like, okay, before, you know, going out for coffee, that was easy. Like, we could do that whenever we wanted. But once you went into lockdown, that was impossible, you know. And then you have families that have started spending more time together, which is now with Venus retrograde. Do you tend to see, because it is actually a planet of love as well, but do you tend to see more relationship breakups and more like conflict in relationships during that time?
Well, this particular one, quite possibly, because Mercury is also conjunct Pluto at the moment. You know, so Mercury is all about communication, and Pluto is about deep, intense transformation. And it's about power, and it's about abuse of power, and it's also about standing in your power. So yes, we could see people in relationships standing in their power and saying, do you know what? I'm not doing the relationship like this anymore. It doesn't mean the relationship is going to break up. It could mean like, do you know what? I'm not putting up with you going to the pub 3 times a week anymore. Well, not that anybody was able to do that for the last 2 years, but it's like, well, no, I want you to prioritize spending more time with the kids, or, you know, I want you to prioritize, you know, going on a family holiday over buying a new car. It's, you know, there will be more people in relationships standing their ground as to what they really value in a relationship. Again, because the Venus retrograde, it's all about reevaluating what really are your values. You know? And
so say we're not actually, you know, there's someone out there, they don't know a lot about astrology, they're not really you know, they don't research or listen to their horoscopes or anything like that, but will they will feel that anyway, won't they? So they will just naturally do it. So they'll just naturally do it, and then once they hear this podcast, then they'll go, oh, that's why all of this is happening. Okay, I understand. And that's the thing, and that's what I love about it, because I can look back and I can look at the charts, and I can look at my stars, and I can look at all of the planets and the retrogrades and stuff, and I can go, oh, that makes sense. Now I know why that's happening. And so, like I said before, 2022 is going to be a massive year. If you're into numerology, then you know the 222, the number 6, time of massive transformational change. And I can see that this year is going to have a lot of change, already has. As you said, the borders have opened up in Ireland, vaccine passes have been relinquished
completely.
Yeah, they've been dropped completely. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of movement going on. What intense planetary changes are happening right now? We've spoken about some of them. There's some conjunctions that are coming in. Like I said, Venus and Mercury are going direct in the same planet of Capricorn. And so what can we expect to see in the year 2022 that is just going to rock our world?
I mean, if we think 2021 and 2020 were big, they're nothing compared to what 2022 is going to be like. But 2022 is going to be a very, very different year. I mean, I've been liking it it's like we've all been at anchor at sea, not quite knowing where we're going. And the anchor has been pulled up, and now we're on the ship and we're sailing, but we're not quite sure where we're going towards. We're doing what they call in sailing terms attack, which is you adjust the boat according to how the wind is blowing, but you still know where you're going. Now, the next main transit which we have, which is the dominant transit of this year, is when Jupiter and Neptune form a conjunction, and that is on the 10th of April. Now, Jupiter and Neptune form a conjunction every 12 or 13 years anyway, because Jupiter takes 12 years to go around your chart. So those two planets will be conjunct anyway, but they're not always conjunct in the same sign. So it's only every 160 years or so that they're conjunct together in Pisces. And wow. Neptune rules Pisces. So this is going to play out in two ways. Like a lot of people have written about, Neptune symbolizes dreams and our higher vision and our most altruistic self and self-sacrifice and giving back to society. The lower vibration of Neptune is addiction and escapism. Yeah. Then we have Jupiter. Jupiter is abundance, travel, faith, our belief system, and then Jupiter expands the energy of any planet it touches. So we're going to see the two of them playing out simultaneously. We are going to see people taking big risks and achieving big dreams, but also what might come out is the level of addiction that increased among people in the last 2 years while they've been locked at home behind closed doors. It's going to play out two ways, and we may see governments wanting to shy away from that, not pay attention to that. And the Mercury-Pluto conjunction is going to make sure that doesn't happen. So, worldwide, we're going to see the two of them playing out at the same time. An awful lot of people have said, the good thing about lockdown was I discovered creativity I never knew I had. I learned to paint during lockdown. I'm on my fifth painting course. I didn't even know how to hold a paintbrush last September. So, we're going to see that. We're going to see an explosion of online book publishing, and people, we've already seen that explosion very quietly in the last 2 years. We're going to see people saying, do you know what? I really want to explore my creative side. I'm going to take the big risk. I'm going to do the big dream. I'm going to take 3 months, because Jupiter is travel. I'm going to take 3 months and go somewhere and travel and then write my book while I'm there. But then we'll also see people who might go to do that and then just escape instead and not do anything. So we're going to see both play out. It'll be fascinating.
That will be really fascinating. And I mean, I'm a Sagittarius, so my Jupiter rules my star sign. So it's kind of it's all about, because Sagittarius is all about travel and it's all about abundance, and it's because Jupiter does rule it. So it's really a fascinating study when you look into your horoscopes, and if you can match them up to the planetary changes that are happening, then I think that it's actually really, really interesting, and it does open your eyes to a lot of things. So, we've got Jupiter and Neptune. They're going into conjunction. What else is going on for us this year?
Well, they're the main ones. That's the dominant, because, last year the dominant planetary theme was Saturn, Uranus squaring off each other 3 times a year. And we're still in the aftermath of that. So Saturn is rules and regulations and governments, and then Uranus is genius and innovation, doing things differently. So that's why we had such a lightning speed explosion in the vaccines, and how many vaccines were invented, and how many vaccines were brought on the market. And then we went from vaccines to boosters. Nobody expected, people thought 1 vaccine and we'll all get back to normal. And then it was 2 vaccines. And now here we are, 2 vaccines and 3 boosters. And this is where, the Mercury Pluto, the collective, is saying, do you know what, we're not doing this anymore. So again, going back to Jupiter and Neptune being the dominant theme, we're going to see, and I've seen it among my clients already in America, clients who may have said 2 years ago, oh, I really want to live a collective lifestyle. I really want to buy a piece of land and build a house on it and have some tiny homes on it. And I now have clients who are saying, we're doing that now. Not we're doing it in 6 months' time. It's like, we've done it. We're going to see an explosion in the tiny home movement. We're going to see an explosion in tiny homes on wheels. How we do finance is going to be completely changed, because the other main theme is that the United States has the first hit of their own Pluto return this year. because Pluto takes 248 years to return to its natal place on your chart. And the United States, you know, is the first country to have its Pluto return analyzed, because Pluto was only discovered in 1930. So that first hit is the 22nd of February of this year. And Pluto in the United States natal chart is in the second house. The second house is your individual finances, and it's also your movable talents and skills. And by the time of that first, when Jupiter Neptune forms its first conjunction, then those planets will have moved almost to the IC of the natal chart of the United States, and the IC symbolizes home and roots and family of origin. So we're going to see a complete breakup in how American society is on a level unparalleled. Because if you look at Biden, all Biden has really been doing is treading water for the last year. He hasn't done any more harm than Trump has done, but I'm not really sure what else he's done. Nobody really knows what he's done. He's just been like holding things afloat, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, there was a time when the rest of the world looked to see what was happening in America. That's not happening anymore. We are in a much more global world.
Yeah.
We are in a world where people can study whatever they want online. They don't have to leave their house. It doesn't have to be doing an Irish course on Zoom. I'm here in Ireland talking to you in Australia. I was talking to somebody in America 2 hours ago.
Oh, and I say that to the kids all the time, because I've got an 18 and a 20-year-old. And I say, you know, because I often have people and they say to me, I feel so sorry for the kids of today, because, you know, there's so much pressure and you know, obviously with the invention of the smartphones, you know, things can get a lot, you know, they're addictive for kids, and you know, they never have time to shut off. It's always go. But in the same respect, I say to them, actually, I think our kids are in the best generation, because I think that our kids have so many opportunities that we never had as kids. I mean, if we wanted to work, we had to go out, get a job, 9-to-5 job. That was it. That was our options. We had nothing else, because the internet wasn't invented. The internet wasn't invented. I didn't get my first computer till I was in like high school. And so I think that, you know, if you look at it that way and you see that they can create, I mean, my son, he loves gaming. I mean, that's one of his things. He's been doing a uni course on programming. My daughter, she's an eyelash technician. She's only 18 years old, but she's building her own business. She's fully booked already, and she's 18 years old. And that's stuff. Amazing. Yeah, and that is stuff that has happened. And she does it all through Instagram. And I think that that's the thing. It's like how you perceive things. And I think that if you look at it, like you said, the technology now, us starting to realize during this last 2 years, people have started to realize what their talents are. They've started to realize what their skills are. They've started to build more home businesses and online businesses, because they've had no choice. That's been be at home or do nothing. You know, it's kind of like, so when Pisces in the United States reunite, how does that affect the rest of the world? Because I know, you know, this is basically in the United States, but we know energy is energy. We know that it's going to affect the rest of the world. But how does that affect the rest of the world when it comes to money, finances, all of that sort of thing?
It would be fascinating to see, because the United States is no longer the epicenter of the world the way it was.
Yeah.
You know, and the 4 years of Trump is what did that. I mean, you know, over here in Ireland, they used to say, you know, America was the country you'd look up to. America was the country of the big dream. Then in the dying days of Trump, you know, people were saying, actually, people look to America now and pity America for what it's become. I mean, that's quite a strong thing to say. I mean, having lived there for 2.5 years, to me, it was still the land of opportunity. It was no longer the land of freedom, but it was the land of opportunity. But because Pluto was going to be in the second house, that's all about finances, you know. So what we're going to see is, you know, we're definitely going to see, you know, banks in Ireland, for example, the two of the main banks here are closing in the next couple of months. We're going to see people moving towards, you know, other online platforms like Stripe and PayPal and Venmo and Revolut. And that's not necessarily a good thing, because everything now is linked to your phone, and people are kind of going, oh, that's great, that's wonderful, it's handy, it's all on my phone. But is it really? Like, I was trying to pay my rent last week, and the app for my bank wouldn't work because the internet and my phone wasn't working. And then I was going, okay, well, I log on to my bank online on my laptop, and then it's like, but if I do that, they'll send a ping to my phone, but the internet and the phone isn't working. So I
Mercury Retrograde.
Yeah, but that's kind of the end of the Uranus Saturn thing, because that's what's happening quietly behind the scenes. We are being more controlled. We are being more monitored. Everything is on our phone. Everybody does know now. We all think, Google App Tracker, and these are all the places you visited in the last 6 months. Like, that's not that great either. And, some people are saying we're going to move to Bitcoin. Some people are saying we're going to move towards bartering. Some people are saying we'll go back to cash under the mattress. I mean, I would recommend that people do like all 4 or 5 for the next couple of years till we see what's going to happen. But with Pluto being in the second house, it's almost like because Pluto is all about death and rebirth. So it's all about the dying and rebirth of America as being the epicenter of everything in terms of movable talents and skills, and terms of finances. So
that's going to be interesting when Pluto. Yeah,
it's not going to be the country that people look to anymore, and it hasn't been. But it hasn't been that for the last year or two. But that's going to be even more intensified once the United States hits its Pluto return. The United States is going to be transformed more than any country.
Wow, it's I can see. Yeah, I can see massive changes are starting to happen. I remember years and years ago, like when I first started in the online space, and I remember that would have been about 12, 13 years ago, I guess. And I remember that everything was about America. You could only sign up for platforms in America. You could only get stuff shipped to America. You had to have an American address for so much. But now they're opening up to so many other countries. And I think they're starting to realize that, there are other countries that we're sort of like, that are in this world too. And so I think things are totally changing in that respect. I think I think exactly what you say. I think they're going to start realizing this more and more in the coming years. So
I'm actually far more curious to see what's going to happen in Britain. Because they've just come out of Brexit now. And, at one point, Britain was threatening not to do a trade agreement with America once Brexit was passed. And one way, I'm not sure which way it was going, and America was going, well, actually, you can't do that because we're the custodians of the Good Friday Agreement. You actually can't do that. You can't insist we have a trade deal with you. We don't want to. Because everybody forgets that Brexit was passed, and in theory, all the T's were crossed and the I's were dotted just before the first of the pandemic. But we're only now seeing how it's actually playing out. And, it's like, as I said, like last week, they keep trying to get rid of Boris Johnson, and he keeps bouncing back. He's absolutely a fascinating person to watch, just from that point of view. Like, nobody likes him. Nobody has anything good to say about it. And they tried to get him to resign. They tried to a vote of no confidence. They're trying to do this and this and this, and the guy is still there.
Yeah, he perseveres. You've got to give him that.
Yeah. But it'd be fascinating to see, because like the old superpowers aren't there anymore. America isn't the superpower it was. And even, even the fact that, the American truck drivers crossed the border into Canada and said, how are you lads? We're joining you in your protest. Nobody would have ever thought that would have happened. And if it did, you would have thought it was the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely. The changes are incredible, that if you look around the world, that are happening at the moment. And I'm sure we've got plenty more to see in this coming year. Now, I am also a massive fan. I actually, being spiritual, I actually do tarot a fair bit as well. And the sun and the moon play such a massive part in astrology as well. And so what happens, like when we're talking about retrogrades, we're talking about going direct and all that, what impact does the sun and the moon have in our lives. I mean, sun is power, obviously it's energy. So what sort of impact does the power of the moon? The sun in your birth
chart represents, you know, how you shine and how you show up in the world, and where it falls in your chart will tell you what house is most activated by your sun.
Yeah.
You know, if somebody's born with the sun in the first house, they tend to be born with quite a strong sense of self. If somebody is born with the sun in the 10th or the 11th house, those are the houses where you're more visible to the world, and the 11th house is the house of the collective. So very often people would be leaders in their field if they're born with the sun in one of those houses. And interestingly enough, we've been talking about the United States, you know, the last 4 or 5 or even 6 American presidents all were born with the sun in the 11th or the 10th or the 11th house. Now the moon is very different. The moon is more your feminine energy, but it's also your more unconscious self and your unconscious, subconscious emotions. And it's like how your emotions drive you. And that's why the new moon and the full moon is such a big deal, because the new moon is a time of setting intention for what you want to bring into your life for the next 6 months. And then the full moon is a time of releasing and letting go anything that no longer serves you. And the sign that the new and the full moon is in will tell you, you know, what the themes are of that particular new or full moon. And then when we're doing people's natal charts, we see what other planets are they touching. There'll be the collective new moon and full moon chart, and then there'll be the individual new moon and full moon chart. Like one person might have the new moon hitting their Mercury very strongly, and the person beside them might have it hitting their Venus very strongly. So that, you know, the new moon and the full moon, you know, they vary hugely from person to person, because the moon is the fastest planet going around your chart. The moon only takes 28 days to go around your chart, versus Pluto, which takes 248 years. So that's why the
slightly different.
Bit of a difference between, you know, 28 days and 248 years. So that's why the new moon and the full moon are so important, because they move so fast. You know,
absolutely.
2.5 days. You know,
and I know that myself and, you know, so many out there, we have new moon and full moon rituals as well. There, you know, we set our intentions, and that's really important to me every new moon. Full moon, I find, is about emotional release. It's about being able to let go of, you know, this is a great time for forgiveness. It's a great time to figure out exactly what it is that's been on your mind, and start to realize that, you know, we need to let go of all of this if we're going to be able to move ourselves forward. And so the new moon in February, what are we going into in February with the new moon?
Well, in February, again, it'll be, you know, the themes of Mercury and Pluto, because, as I said, other planetary, you know, main or the planetary alignments do affect, you know, the moon. So we'll still be, what we'll do is we'll be seeing a deepening of people's emotional awareness around how they communicate. Given that Mercury is communication, we'll still be in the post-shadow phase. And then Pluto is all about deep, intense personal transformation. So we'll see people, you know, really going into the depths of their emotion in a way they may not have dared to do in the last 2 years, because it might have been just too uncomfortable to go there, because so many people were just trying to get through the last 2 years as best they could. And now it is a time of, you know, either setting intentions or releasing and letting go. You know?
And that's the thing. I think I think February is going to be quite big in that regard for people starting to, I feel like it's going to be a time that people are going to start to become in their power. I feel like it's a time that they're going to let go of what's been holding them back, and they're going to start going, this is who I am, this is what I want, and this is what's going to happen. And you know, I'll tell everybody out there, if you believe in yourself enough, you have the power to create the life of your dreams. Okay. Absolutely. And I think that February is going to be massive for that. Now I'm going to just go a little bit into a little bit of fun here in terms of my star sign, Sagittarius. We went through a massive change in December. And I think that I had a lot of emotions and all sorts of stuff come up in December. And so what can us as Sagittarians expect in the month of February?
Well, it depends on how many planets you have that are ruled by Sagittarius. Somebody might have their sun sign in Sagittarius, but like, a lot of personal planets, in Capricorn or in Aquarius, because, the sun sign is only actually a small part of who you are. Now, for some reason, I tend to find that people who are born with the sun sign in Sagittarius, they do tend to have 2 or 3 other planets in Sagittarius. So there's a real sense of like, you know what, we've thrown the anchor off and we're just going to go for it. Because when we look at what's happened worldwide already, and this is only the 27th of January.
Yep.
We've seen the American truckers and the Canadian truckers on their way to Ottawa. We've seen the Australian truckers going, yeah, we're joining you. We've seen people try to get rid of Boris Johnson in Britain, and he's still there. We've seen several really important legal cases being taken against various government bodies in Ireland. This is all massive stuff, so Sagittarians, people with a lot of Sagittarian energy in their chart, like it is a mutable sign. So the mutable sign is flexible. Mutable signs are adaptable. And the people who are going to come out the best out of the pandemic are the people who are able to navigate their way through it. Like, as I said, it's like tacking on a boat. It's like, I'm leaving Cork Harbour and I want to get to New York. And I know I can't go in a straight line, but I'm not going completely off course. So I just have, because tacking is when you adjust your boat and you adjust your sails in accordance with the wind. But if you go too far off, then you never get to America anyway, and you end up, where would you end up? You end up in Greenland. You see, I've got my map of the world behind me. There's a reason for that. But it's, and if anybody's going to dream big this year, it would be people with a lot of Sagittarian energy in their chart, because Jupiter, is conjunct Neptune. I mean, I know myself, I've got very big plans for later in the year, and I'm just, I'm kind of keeping quiet about them at the moment. But it is a time of, deep reflection of like, what, we've come through so much, and people have made, so many people made sacrifices that ended up not being for anything. And if anything, that's going to make people even more say, do you know what? I'm not even waiting until 2 months' time. I'm going to like go off somewhere and walk away from the family for 2 months and really write that book and finally get it published somehow, or I'm going to take up line dancing, or I'm going to really go to yoga, or it's one of the first things I did when things reopened was like ring my yoga teacher. That's something we would have taken completely for granted 2 years ago. I haven't done, I did a yoga weekend. It was actually during the full moon, and it was actually really interesting to see how much did get released. And then things reopened, and like, 5 years ago, it would have been like, okay, I'll go to the pub and I'll meet loads of friends. Now it's like, I ring my yoga teacher. That's how much people's priorities have changed. And, because the Sagittarian energy, it's a very useful energy. And I love it. And, a lot of my friends have a lot of Sagittarian energy in their chart, because it's actually the sign that rules my descendant. So, people with a lot of Sagittarian energy, they probably will be doing the big trips this year. They probably will think, I'm leaving Perth and I'm going to New Zealand and Tasmania, and I'll go over to America, and then I'll take in a bit of Europe on the way. And it's not just, the flight prices have come down, restrictions are coming down. So I think we're going to see travel on an unparalleled level this year.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like this is what I've been feeling coming into 2022. Is I said to all of my friends all over the world, doing podcast interviews, you meet so many incredible people, and I said this year I'm determined. I'm going to head across and I'm going to catch up with you, Europe and America, and do the trip, and that was what one reason why, as I said to you in the pre-interview, I work a couple of days with my husband, and so I got the vaccines because we would be able to travel. We like cruising. Have you ever been on a cruise?
No, not yet.
Oh, it's the most amazing experience. We take the kids because everything's covered. It's fantastic. And of course, we normally go on a cruise like every couple of years, and all of that's been shut down. and we haven't been able to go on a holiday for a couple of years, and so it's going to be great for everything to open up and us to be able to travel again. And I feel like this year is going to be a year of travel for me, which will be so amazing, because I'm just looking forward to just being able to chill out for a little bit and catch up with all my amazing friends, which will be fantastic. So awesome. There's some really great stuff happening for Sagittarians this year. There's great stuff happening for all the star signs this year. And I think that astrology is a great way to start to figure all of this out. But remember that, we create our own destiny. So we don't let this stand in your way. It's just being aware. Astrology is a way to be aware of what's going to happen or what's going on. And then you can kind of, like with the Mars retrograde, just account for it. Okay, don't be scared of it, because it's nothing to be scared of, but account for it and go, okay, well, if somebody's going to take a little bit longer to reply, it's not a personal thing. It's just that something might have happened. I've had it where, people haven't replied, but it's gone to their spam, or it's gone to somewhere else. They didn't realize it, or something's happened. And so, like you said, and I think it's the best piece of advice, just remember that, it's not personal, and give them a little bit of leeway, because I think that this sort of stuff can happen this time of the year. Now, one thing that I want to cover, we've covered so much in this interview, and I always love talking to you. It's so much fun. But we've got to go into astrocartography, because that is something that is your passion. And it's something that I had never heard about until I met you. And so can you go a little bit into what astrocartography is and how it may help somebody with their future visions, their dreams, with their creativity, and like I said, with them fulfilling their best self, I suppose. So go into that for a bit for me.
Yeah, to me, it's the most mind-blowing part of astrocartography, and the reason I'm so passionate about it is it's because it was part of my first own astrology session. Astrocartography is basically mapping the planetary lines across the world. And it's to do with latitude and longitude, and then you take into account that the Earth is round. So when you do a natal chart, it's a round circle, and the planets in your chart fall into different houses, and then the planets talk to each other in a certain way. And before we get into astrocartography, what we do is a relocated chart. So that's where you regenerate the natal chart as if somebody had been born somewhere else. So like I was born in Dublin. So a relocated chart is if I regenerate the chart as if I'd been born in Perth. And the planets change houses. How the planets talk to each other tends not to change, but the houses will change. So therefore, the areas of influence in your life will change. And then once you do that, then you go to the astrocartography. But the other thing that's really important to remember is you carry the resonance of your natal birth chart wherever you go. And then a transit chart is where the planets are in your chart now, and what themes are coming up now for healing or for release or for you to work on. So even if I was to pack up today now and go to Perth tomorrow, the transits that I'm going through will go with me. And a lot of people don't understand that. And there's been a huge explosion of interest in astrocartography in the last few years. And a lot of people think, oh, you jump straight to mapping the lines. And if I move to where my Venus line is strong, I'll find love. If I move to where Pluto line is strong, I might die and be reborn. If I move to my Mars line, I'll, be more driven to take action. It's not as simple as that. It's like you have to understand the natal chart first and then the transit chart, because those energies go with you. And astrologers differ as to whether the relocated chart is as important as a natal chart. And for me, certainly, having lived off a lot of relocated charts, I do think they're as important. Like, for example, I've got my Sun, Venus and Mercury in my 12th house in Ireland. So the Sun is kind of like the hidden leader in the 12th house. Mercury in the 12th house, I'm not necessarily heard. Venus in the 12th house, I'm not necessarily valued. But Venus moves to my first house in Kerry and Cork. So in Kerry and Cork, I am heard.
Okay.
And then when I moved to Cape Cod, my Sun, Moon, Mercury and Venus all moved to the bottom of my chart, to my IC, which is home and roots and family of origin. So they were 4 of my personal charts. So it literally was, I quietly felt at home on Cape Cod.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. Because
so and then when you understand those, then you go to the astrocartography. And you know, when I do astrocartography, people get very carried away and they go, because I usually ask people to give me 3 places they're drawn to. And they'll invariably come back with, you know, South America, Canada, and Australia. And I go, no, they're 3 continents, 3 places. It's hilarious. I'm well used to it at this stage. And this is why when you prepare a chart for somebody, you know that very often what they're going to ask you is going to change on what they thought they were going to ask you. But for example, like when I was living on my Mars line, it was easier for me to take action because my Mars is quite restricted in my natal chart.
yeah,
I find it hard to take the courage to take action because natally my Mars is squared by Saturn. That can be either somebody who's afraid to take risks, or it can be somebody who's a workhorse and is slower than everybody else but always gets there. So both aspects of my chart are true. But when I was living on Boston and Cape Cod, I was right on my Mars line. It was like literally I never stopped. So, you know, and then it's really important if you're doing a family chart, because very often I get asked to do a chart for husband and wife and the kids. But the person who most wants to move is the person whose chart is most important. So if you're doing a chart for husband and wife and the 3 kids, as long as where they're moving to support, you know, the adults in the relationship, that will then support the kids, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like what the popular astrology says, you move to your Venus line and you find love. That's nothing to do with astrocartography. On the other hand, moving to a strong Venus line, if Venus aspects your sun, for example, where you move, or if Venus trines your ascendant, then you will feel more valued. If Venus squares your descendant, you'll find a challenge in being valued by others. So they're 2 very different interpretations of Venus. And then the minor aspects are really important in astrocartography, like septiles and quintiles, because they would indicate, you know, either inner creativity or divine outer, it's inspiration. And, you know, they tend not to be covered in natal chart readings. So it's a mind-blowing part of astrology. It's a complete field of its own, and I love it because I've lived it for so long now, you know.
Absolutely, and that reminds me, I'm going to have to organise to get you to do my chart, because I think that would be really fascinating. So one thing I just wanted to say before we do wrap up, because this has been an awesome interview and we've got so much incredible stuff that people have been able to learn from this. We were talking about Mercury and Venus. They're going both going direct into Capricorn. What does that mean when both of them are in the same star sign at the same time?
It means when they come out of retrograde, we will be finally then really reevaluating how we communicate and our value system, because Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. So Saturn is all about rules and regulation, discipline and structure. So there will be, when people come out of the retrograde period, a real kind of reckoning. It's like sitting down with a notebook and like, okay, I don't value this and I do value that. And there will be a real reckoning around like, what am I letting go of from now on? You know, and even like, you know, even to the terms of like, what friendships do I value? Or even in Venus retrograde, if people come back into your life, you kind of go like, am I going to welcome them with open arms just because they've come back into my life? Or do they fit the new me? Do they fit my new value system? And very often an old coming back into your life does cause you to reevaluate and say, actually, I valued that friendship more than I realized. I do want that friendship back. Or even if I don't want the friendship back, I want what the friendship symbolized.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the thing. You will find friendships can be affected, and relationships too, during this time. So it's a time of great reflection. It's a time of you, like we said before, rewrite your story and figure out exactly what you want 2022 to be. And Martha, if people want to come and get their charts read and that, how can they contact you and what are your details?
Well, thank you very much for asking me, Jennifer. And again, thank you again for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. My website is marthaclarkeastrology.com, Martha with the H, Clarke with an E, astrology.com. You can book a natal chart reading there, or a transit reading, or an astrocartography reading. I also have, a free webinar on creativity coming up on the 8th of February, which anybody can sign up for. And I also have a free moon book, which anybody can sign up for on my website. And, I have blogs going back about 2 years. I blog regularly. So there's a lot of free content on my website for people to read if they want to know more about the planets in their chart, or if they want to know more about, the Saturn return or the Uranus opposition, or what retrogrades mean, because I've been working a lot on doing blogs for the last 2 years for that reason.
Yeah.
To have
You've got a lot of content on there, which is awesome.
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome. And definitely check out Martha's website. She does have a lot of content there, and it will get you started with your astrology. It'll get you started with figuring out your star signs, figuring out the planets. It's a lot of fun once you get into it, and it does start to clear things up just a little bit for you. So thank you so much for joining me today, Martha. I have thoroughly enjoyed it, and like I said, I'm definitely going to come and get my charts done by you.
I can't wait. Thank you, Jess.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.